Hello, everyone. This is Michelle with Michelle Crochets and Crafts. We are continuing our study of the book of Matthew. I hope you all are doing well. Excuse me. I'm waiting for people to show up. Hello, Casey. You're the first one here. Okay, Matthew 11 was the turning point where Jesus is not so highly favored anymore. The Pharisees and Sadducees are seeking to kill him. So he is trying to stay out of the limelight. Here's evidence of Jesus' turning point. Before Matthew 12, Jesus regularly addressed the crowds. After Matthew 12, Jesus increasingly huddled in private with his disciples. Before Matthew 12, his miracles were public displays of the power of God. And after Matthew 12, Jesus' miracles were more private acts of compassion on individuals. Before Matthew 12, Jesus spoke in the present tense about his kingdom. And after Matthew 12, Jesus spoke in the future tense about his church. Before Matthew 12, Jesus focused on his mission and message. After Matthew 12, Jesus turned his attention to the crucifixion and the resurrection. Before Matthew 12, Jesus spoke in simple and straightforward words. After Matthew 12, Jesus taught in parables. I'm going to be reading to you Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 8 in the New King James Version. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. The disciples were hungry. Understandably, they plucked off a few heads of grain. No big deal, right? Wrong. Talk about losing perspective. These legalistic Pharisees were upset not because Peter and company popped a few grains into their mouths, something the Bible clearly permitted them to do, but because they did so on Saturday, the seventh day of the week, which was the Jewish Sabbath. According to their traditions, the religious leaders who witnessed the indiscretion equated the plucking of a few heads of grain as equal to a farmer harvesting his entire wheat crop, which is an act forbidden them on the sacred seventh day. The noted Bible scholar R.C.H. Lenski goes so far as to point out that to pluck the grain could actually warrant a death sentence. These Pharisees had mastered the fine art of putting the people under an unbearable load. No wonder Matthew ended his previous chapter with Jesus' comforting words about his easy yoke. In verses 9 through 14, it reads in the New King James Version, "Now when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him. Then he said to them, What man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value then is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him how they might destroy him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the audacity of these Pharisees? Jesus encountered a man with a withered hand sitting in the synagogue. Mark's account adds a bit of color to this story. First, Jesus asked the man to stand before the entire assembly so that there would be no doubt as to what was said and done. Second, Jesus would look around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts. That was in Matthew chapter 3, verse 5. Jesus was not trying to pick a fight. Predictably, it was the Pharisees who were looking for any excuse to accuse Jesus. They were the ones who were gunning for him. These religious leaders decided to follow an arbitrary tradition that made it unlawful to practice medicine on the Sabbath, except in life-threatening situations. Well, nuts to tradition. The guy was hurting and needed healing. Jesus performed one and restored his hand. The Pharisees were nearly apoplectic at what they viewed as a flagrant display of disrespect for the Sabbath. Hello, Doretha. How are you? From that point on, the religious leaders banded together and obsessed about one all-consuming desire: to kill the King of the Jews. Only Matthew records the emotional vignette about a sheep falling into the ditch on the Sabbath. Not one person there would hesitate to pull it out. Yet to restore to a human being the use of his hand on the Sabbath became anathema to these guys, even though the law nowhere prohibited the giving of medicine, healing, or any other act of mercy on the Sabbath. There's a key point here. At this point, the Pharisees shifted their strategy, significantly so. Up until now, they merely sought to discredit Jesus by trapping him with their false accusations and carefully crafted questions. Now, they showed their hand clearly and unmistakably. They formed a conspiracy that sought nothing less than Jesus' total destruction. Mum's the word, verses 15 through 21. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. Yet he warned them not to make him known, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break. Good morning, Susan. How are you this morning? Doretha says waiting to have x-rays and lab work at hospital. It's routine. Praying it all goes well, Doretha. And smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory. And in his name Gentiles will trust. If whodunit novels are your kind of thing, you're going to love this passage. Matthew 12, 15 through 21 contains a clue, a hint, a veiled reference, a subtle indication that Jesus' plan and program are about to change radically and dramatically. Just trying to wake up. Awesome. Yeah, you're way on the West Coast, so it's 7:15 there. Before you read any further in this commentary, it says, go back and reread the passage and see if anything strikes you as odd or different. So we'll reread this passage, 15 through 21. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there, and great multitudes followed them, and he healed them all. Yet he warned them not to make him known, that it might be fulfilled that which was spoken by the prophet Isaiah, saying, Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory, and in his name Gentiles will trust. So you might have noticed these three curious details. First, Jesus withdrew. Prior to this passage, most everything Jesus did was out in the open, in full view of the wondering lay people and their whining leaders. Not anymore. Jesus shrank from the crowd. He knew that the leaders were plotting his death. At this point, Jesus didn't want to incite further the hostilities of these hypocritical men, so he pulled away. That didn't stop the people from finding him. Drawn to hurting people as he was, even at this personally desperate hour, Jesus took the time, expended the energy, and healed them all. Second, Jesus warned those he healed not to reveal who he was. He knew that the timing and manner of his death were just as important as the death itself. He couldn't run the risk of having multitudes of people running around the countryside proclaiming his wondrous acts to others, further inflaming the jealousies of those who sought to kill him. Adding to this, we'll see in Matthew 13 that Jesus will now spend increasing amounts of time alone with the disciples, preparing them for his coming demise. The continuous press of the crowds would make this virtually impossible. He needed to withdraw, and he needed to withdraw now. Finally, and this is huge, this scripture section ends with a quote from Isaiah, "And in his name Gentiles will trust." So it says, read that again. In his name Gentiles will trust. Do you see the all-important word Gentiles? That's you and me. Up until now, the entire focus of Jesus's message and ministry was on Israel. His sole focus was on the Jews. Gentiles didn't have a seat at the table as far as Jesus and the disciples were concerned. Okay, now Jesus is talking about Gentiles, non-Jews. That's us, the nations, you and me, assuming you are not Jewish. Turning to him in faith. From this point forward in Matthew's Jewish gospel, Gentiles will factor more and more prominently in Jesus's thinking and teaching. The nation of Israel is about to make a formal and final rejection of their Messiah, at least as far as the Jews of Jesus's generation are concerned. The kingdom now rejected, Jesus will increasingly turn to the Gentiles and offered to them what Israel declined: salvation in his name. There's a prophecy here. It says Isaiah predicted this shift in emphasis 700 years before Jesus inhaled his first breath. In Matthew 12, 18 through 21, contains Matthew's paraphrase of Isaiah 42, verses 1 through 4. By using images like bruised reeds, which were musical instruments like flutes, no longer capable of making music because they are bruised or cracked, and smoking flax, which is useless for giving light, Isaiah described the character and conduct of the Jewish Messiah as one who had compassion for the lowliest of the lost, those who in the eyes of others had no value, dignity, or worth. He came not to gather the strong and organize them into a revolutionary force, but rather to show mercy and bring healing to the weak. And that's where we're ending today, because I ran out of time. But the wrap up, I'm going to read the three sections of the chapter wrap up that we've covered so far. In Matthew 12 is the major turning point, both in Matthew's gospel and of the ministry and message of Jesus. That's talking about Matthew 12 as a whole. In Matthew 7, Jesus condemned the religious leaders because they were more concerned about keeping every detail of their religious rituals rather than they were about showing compassion to those in need. And in Matthew 12, verses 9 through 14, the Pharisees plotted to destroy Jesus because he healed a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. We will cover the next 4 sections next time, probably tomorrow. I want to ask you some questions. What observable differences did the events of Matthew 12 bring to the ministry and message of Jesus, and why? Before Matthew 12, Jesus addressed the crowds, used miracles to publicly display God's power, spoke of the kingdom in the present tense, focused on his mission and message, spoke in a simple and straightforward manner, and presented his message to Israel alone. After Matthew 12, Jesus huddled with his disciples, performed miracles as private acts of compassion, spoke to the church in the future, or spoke of the church in the future tense, focused on his crucifixion and resurrection, taught in parables, turned his message toward the nations. Jesus had no choice but to make this shift as Israel made a formal and final rejection of him as their Messiah. Wow. And another question, how did the miracle of the demon... Oh, wait, I don't know if that one... It doesn't say. I guess that one we haven't read yet. So we will go over that question tomorrow. I hope you all are doing well. I'm cutting this one short today. I've got to rest before I go to Pilates. I hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless you. I may be on later tonight to discuss our... we got 4 more people interested in the handmade Christmas ornament exchange. I still need their addresses. Until I get their addresses, I really don't want to add them in. So what I may do is pick people to that we have addresses for right now, and those other 4, I'll group them together in a different section because I'm still needing 4 addresses. And since I don't have them, I can't send them to the people who will be drawing them, if you know what I mean. So I will be on later this evening. I hope you all have a wonderful day. May God richly bless you. Have a great day, everyone. Bye for now.